Time now to take a look at what is making the headlines of the international papers this morning. Joining me to do just that is Joseph Danquah. As so often, Joseph, welcome back
thank you.
A beautiful morning in London. Let's start with a beautiful newspaper this day. They are talking about a slight change in the electoral process in Nigeria. Tell us a little bit more.
It's got to do with election disputes and, the way it's being solved now. People are taking their cases to court and they are making appeals, and they want maybe the election to be rerun or a recount, or there to be an annulment of the election altogether. And you're looking here about some governorships in the River State and the Tupara states, where the candidates and their party took the case to court, and the judge has to give a ruling on it, which will be done in the due process.
And does this relate to the recent elections?
Yes, it does relate to the recent elections. But the specifics about this is that, looking at it specifically, shows that Nigeria the democratic process is evolving, and it's giving itself a chance for change, which is very important, because most of these things previously were dealt through violence, but now the courts have taken over the stance of resolution in electoral disputes, and this is the way Nigeria is going now.
There we go. Very interesting. Let's move on now to the USA Today paper, which, as so many papers have been for the last few weeks, leads on the migrant crisis. Europe orders summit on migrant crisis. Just how responsible are European countries really to try and end what is appalling, the images we're seeing of thousands of people and lots of deaths, of course. Just how, what do you think, Joseph, needs to be done by the European countries and the leaders of these European countries to try and stop this? They're
in a no-win situation. They have to tackle it head on, because the problem is that now the migrants are at their doorstep. It's different that they were somewhere in Africa trying to come in. Once you see what happens, that once Gaddafi was overthrown in Libya, that buffer against such migration into Europe was broken, because it seems that ISIS and others and other rebel groups do not care. So once they've got into mainland Europe, the European Union and its allies need to put in a lot of money to help this refugee crisis, and to make sure that they put a buffer so that this thing doesn't continue, because a lot of migrants are losing their lives. You can see boats capsizing, people have got missing on the way, and all sorts of things, children, vulnerable children, women, and it's something which the European Union and the West have to tackle head on. The summit just coming on is in good place, but they need to put in money and make sure that that buffer against such infiltration is stopped, and look at the root cause of the problem, and its conflict, which is the root cause of it.
Angela Merkel, of course, has been attacked in recent days for saying that this crisis is worse than what we'd seen in Greece recently, in terms of Greece leaving the euro and what that could do economically for Europe. Would you agree with that assessment, that it is even more important and significant to sort out this crisis of migrants into Europe?
Yes, it is, because you see, many of the now, since 2008, Europe has not been in tip-top form economically, and with these migrants coming in, are those countries receiving the migrants economically prepared, socially, economically, politically? And such problems of these migrants coming in give whip up and rise to right-wing parties taking advantage of this situation and whipping up sentiments against these people coming in. So it's got a problem of economic, political and social problems, which could raise up its ugly head, which I think the West should tackle head on.
You're right in that it does fuel sometimes the fire for the right to say that this is obviously not good, and they play on people's fears. But we've seen in this country, in the UK before, us being able to take many thousands of migrants before, assimilate them into society, and for them to play a very important role in society. Lots of our public services wouldn't be around, or wouldn't service as they do at the moment, without migrants. So do you think there is hope in terms of being able to persuade European countries to take many more than they currently are?
Well, they need to look at it and assess how much they can take in. Yes, they've done in the past, taking in migrants and refugees, they have. But then, with time, as the economic fortunes dwindle and the population rises, does the country have the capacity to continue to take in people it's not ready to take in? These are the things they need to look at. But it all depends on, the European Union working together and complementing each other on its weaknesses and strengths, which is very important.
So you think this summit is sort of long overdue then on this issue?
Yes, I think so.
Well, let's move on then to the Wall Street Journal, another American paper. This is the Asia edition, and one of the headlines there, crisis put first dents in Xi's power. This is, of course, referring to Xi Jinping, the president of China, and it's talking about the recent slumps in the market there, which has caused shockwaves around markets around the world. Just how important is the economy in China, not only obviously for the other economies around the world, in America and in Europe, but also in terms of the control the government has over its people in China?
Yes, I mean, President Xi is said to have constricted power within himself. And usually the economy is run by the Prime Minister, who is Prime Minister Li. But apparently, President Xi has taken total control of the economy, and therefore he's now, there's a blame is being put on him saying that he's concentrated too much power on himself, so therefore he's not zeroing in on the problems which are facing the country. And you know now that there's an anti-corruption drive, and people are believing that there's a form of, there's a conspiracy story coming out saying that it could be the work of those who are against this anti-corruption movement. You understand me? But I look at it strongly. President Xi needs to sit down and analyze the crisis. What is the way forward? They need to come together. The Central Committee needs to come together and look at its policy network very, very well. And then from there, they take it on from there. But it's very important that China's economy, once it starts slumping, it affects especially third world countries who have a lot of fortunes tied to China. Yeah,
absolutely. It's a very strange situation compared to much of the world, in that when President Xi and the government in China tell the banks to do something, the banks do that something. You don't get that here. When the banks were told to lend here in 2008 during the financial crash, they said no way. No. Whereas in China, if they tell them to lend, they lend, and they lend double, or they'll lend more. They do have this strange power over the banks and over the financial system that maybe we don't. So when there is a slump, it's almost, they are able to sort of contain it, hopefully.
Yes, yeah, because you see it's a more or less like a mixed, you have the government controlling the political system, the Communist Party controlling the political system, and you have the sort of free market economy, which is more or less in a mixed political system. But the central government has the money, and they should be able to dictate because they have the resources to do so. So that's the fix here. But I think that President Xi has got a lot of crisis on his hands now, because if China goes down economically, its power in the world will go down economically, because most of its power was based upon its economic strength, and it was able to influence the world economically through its currency power. Now that the yuan has been devalued and its economy is going down, are we going to see a waning power of the Chinese hegemony? That's another thing we should look at.
There we go. Well, let's move on to the Business Day paper. This is in South Africa, which has the headline there, "Steel mills to close as industry crisis bites." And in South Africa, we've seen before with the miners' strikes, and just how important generally employment is in South Africa, and especially unemployment, youth unemployment. We always hear stories of sort of violence sometimes emanating out of South Africa, and it's often blamed on unemployment. So things like this, the closing of these mills, it's not good for the country, is it?
No, it isn't. I mean, this particular country, this particular steel industry owned by the Mittal, there's apparently 400 people are going to be laid off, and pretty more. Apparently the price of steel has dropped, and they are believing strongly that, you see, Chinese goods coming into the country is coming on the cheap, and therefore it's affecting their productivity, and they are not able to expand their industries. And also there's a power crisis too. Not enough power coming in, so therefore it's also affecting production. So it's a multiple of problems. But South Africa is not doing well economically, and amongst the BRICS countries are made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. I mean, South Africa is not doing too well amongst that group, which is very worrying, because they were seen to be the next big thing in the world, and they are not living up to it.
Well, we've covered a variety of topics there, Joseph. I think we've sorted out most of the world.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed for coming in,
Thank you.
as always.